The course of my life, I've lost a lot of people that are dear to me, that were dear to me. And I like to speak about them in a present tense because I still feel they're around me, because they've moved me. They've changed me as a man, as an individual. And I try to carry their history with me. A lot of people think that passing away is scary, rightfully so, and that losing others is, well, it is inevitable to lose yourself or to lose others, but it's also very scary because we don't know what's after, because this is the end, and there's nothing in the world that you can change about the fact that you're born, walking on the earth like anyone else on the ground, and that you're going to die. These are absolute truths. And I have had two friends who were dear to me, and especially one who killed themselves. And I tried to carry their memory through me. I tried to think, what would they like that people remember them for? And without being too emotional or trying to put myself in that position, it's perhaps because I give myself too much. The heart that I have for humanity, for people, the trust that I put in people, and the trust that I put in the values that I stand for. But I'm willing to take the bet that they would do the same for me. At least this is my bet of life. And today, without going too much into my life, but I wanted to talk about the architecture of loss and how you can cope with death, how you can deal with it, and not just hide the truth from yourself. So, the first quote that drives me is, "Time is like a river made of the events which happened, and with a violent stream." Marcus Aurelius, the king who sat atop of the known world, felt the same destiny, the same feelings that we do. And even to this day, by the way. So that's why it's so interesting to study that man. Because he lived so long ago, thousands of years ago, yet he remains relevant. Yet you see probably a lot of YouTube videos talking about the guy, talking about the man as an emperor, talking about the man as a philosopher. And he observed that as soon as a thing is seen, it is carried away, and another comes in its place, only to be swept away in turn, and that the world is just a big cycle. So we often imagine the Stoics, including him, as statues, cold, like marble. But history paints a more human picture. When Marcus lost his family's beloved tutor, he didn't recite a cold, let's say, philosophy. He didn't try to make it a reflection, a thing of intellect. He wept. He was sad. He was so sad that the whole palace moved to restrain him, fearing for the emperor dignity. But neither philosophy nor empire takes away natural feeling. That is to say that the man, so brilliant as he was and so influential as he was, teaching us about how to remain ourselves, how to deal with grief. It's not a failure of logic. It's basically an integral part of who we are as humans, as humanity. It's basically the moral compass. It's something that is within us. A lot of people see deaths as a traumatizing and very heavy thing. And actually, one of the reasons why we had the religions in the first place was to deal with that. Because there is a certain, and actually an absolute uncertainty around death and around the idea of passing away. What do we expect? What can we expect? And also, how is it for others? How is it for my close one, my family, my friends who are going to lose me? They're going to be sad for me. And I don't want them. Nobody wants that, I think. Unless you're very egoistical. But this grief is the price of the admission that we have for having loved something in a world that's constantly moving, changing. This is precisely why you're sad that you know it was true. You're sad because you knew that this person, this thing that you loved, that you cared for, was there. And that's precisely why you're sad, because it has been taken away from you. It is natural. But the way we can deal with it is often the way how we can lose our way or not, actually. And the Stoics, they challenge us to see the objects of our affection before they're gone. So Epictetus, for example, that I mentioned a lot, and for me is the most influential philosopher of the antiquity. He was a former slave who became one of the biggest and the greatest teachers. He offers a perspective about that. He tells us, if you're fond of a specific cup, for example, remind yourself that it is only a cup that you love. Then it breaks. You will not be disturbed if it breaks. This seems simple and this seems actually very easy. But when you take it further, you say, if you take your child and you kiss them, or your wife, say that you only kiss things that are human. So it sounds a little bit robotic, but if we look deeper, he isn't telling us to love our family less. He's just telling us to love them for what they are, mortal, fragile, and temporary. It's the same with your parents, your friends. We are not immortal. We are mortal beings, and that is one of the only truths that we know for certain. For certain, for sure you're gonna die, and for sure you're gonna see a lot of people around you die, probably. So when we scream at the universe because a loved one has died, we're essentially complaining that a human being acted like a human being. We're surprised that a mortal thing proved to be mortal, but the essence of the quote is that you shouldn't be surprised. It is gone. And when we're torn apart, it's precisely because we haven't probably prepared ourselves for such a thing. And this is exactly what Epictetus is telling us. He's warning us against the fact that it isn't the fact that you're sad or that you're tearing up. It's the collapse of your resolve. It's the collapse of your spirit, your philosophical resolve. It is the shock of the unprepared. If you know you will one day be thrown into the sea, isn't it crazy to refuse to learn how to swim? That's exactly what he says. The second point is that one of the philosophical duty of the Stoics, and actually for some of us, and it's probably not just the philosophy itself, but it's actually something of a duty, somewhat of a duty, that we should do, is to strip things of their masks and see them for what they truly are. So, for example, if you're looking at a stressful interview, a stressful presentation with one of your managers, it's such a small moment in the span of your lives. And it's not something that is going to remain certain. It's not something that will remain true for you in an hour, in 2 days, in 1 week. You will already have forgotten about it. So death is basically exactly like that. It sounds a little bit crazy, but basically what he's saying is that the body is a temporary collection of cells. And these stressful interviews is basically not even, it doesn't even matter in that sense. So death is simply the dissolution of the collection. We judge death as bad, yet we're inconsistent. We celebrate the death of a tyrant. We're indifferent to the death of a stranger across the globe. And I'm sure some of you will be happy when certain politicians around the globe will be dead, or actually you will think about it. You will probably think about whatever you're feeling, actually. Even if you're not feeling necessarily happy or sad about the death of someone famous that you disliked or that you liked, you don't think about that so much to, I don't know, someone that you didn't know or that you didn't care about. Every day, a lot of people die, yet we don't care. So, what I mean is that death isn't necessarily evil. Otherwise, your tears would never stop. Because death is happening every second. It's happening when you eat meat. It's happening when you eat fish. It's happening around you every single day, every second, actually. So the pain that we feel isn't caused by death in a logical way. It's caused by the judgment of it. We grieve because we feel we have lost something. But the Stoics usually ask, was it ever yours to begin with? Your friends, your children, even your own body. You're just taking a loan from the universe. To be angry when they're called back is being angry at the bank for wanting its loan repaid. It's exactly what I've spoken about in my last video. You should think of it as something that you gave back to the universe. And I know it's very hard. And that's precisely what we're doing here. That's precisely why we need to think about it in such terms, because I imagine that perhaps some of you will listen to that, and one day in your life you will lose your grandmother, your grandfather, your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, your friend, your cousin, your wife, your children, your husband, and you will think to yourself, this is the worst day of my life, and it's probably going to be the worst week and the worst month and the worst year, and it's going to be hard to deal with. But that's precisely why it's hard, that you should think about it in a rational way. Otherwise, you will lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, you will not pay respect to the dead. They will probably not want you to be sad forever or dwelling on the past forever. They will want you at some point to move on from that in a philosophical way. That means that you should honor their memory. You should think about them, what they've brought to you, and perhaps, if you can, like every single day, in a loving way. But if you're thinking in a term that you're angry at the universe, or that it's making you unable to move on, to do tasks, to do your job, to study, that is not good. And one of the things that Seneca said is that we often mourn short lives. And he actually said the shortness of life forces us to redefine what long actually means. So imagine this. If a man is caught in a storm, the moment his ship clears the harbor, he's driven in a circle and he's never making it. So when he finally sinks, or when he returns to the ports, has he had a long voyage or a long journey? No, he's just had a long tossing about. So it is with us. We see white hair and wrinkles and we assume a person has lived a long time. But if they lived without a purpose, if they lived in a constant destruction or fear, they haven't lived long enough. They have just existed long. And that's precisely what Seneca warns us about. He's saying, what if your life is to be living until you're 80? Okay, but what have you accomplished? What have you done with it? Have you influenced the people around you? Have you done good around you? Or have you just existed? Have you tried to survive all the way through? So a life with purpose, whatever it is, actually, whatever the example that you might take, it finds itself satisfied regardless of the clock. If you're dying at 20 but you've lived a purpose life, and that you've accomplished what you wanted to accomplish, and that you've lived fully, and that at 20 years old you think to yourself, man, I've made it. I've done all I could, and I've given all I could to the world. Life is lived. It's lived in the now. It's a point between a past that is gone and a future that is uncertain, and the now is now. And it sounds very simple, but you need to act on that. And that is why you should never necessarily be, let's say, too sad that somebody's passing away very soon. Because what if? And well, what if this person had a loving family, a very loving spouse, husband? That life was great. But if you've existed for so long, perhaps, it was too soon. Perhaps you haven't transitioned from existing to living. And that is what he's referring about when he says that no one's life is made better by additional years if those years are spent in the tossing about. Finally, and that is probably one of the most key takeaway for me, if we were immortal, life would lose its flavor. If the ephemeral nature of life is what makes it possible to make good of it, then you shouldn't dwell on it and you shouldn't be sad about it. Imagine this. If we could live until we're 500 years old, not even saying we're immortal, but it would change your perspective. You would think to yourself, well, death doesn't have the same value, but so does life. Because you wouldn't necessarily be too sad about it, because you would think, well, that person lived until they were 500 years old. They've lived through, let's say, 500 years old person is dead today. They have lived through Renaissance, through the French Revolution, through the Napoleonic War, through the First World War, the Second World War. Imagine all those events. The knowledge you've transmitted, you've acquired, the history you have witnessed. You wouldn't be necessarily super sad about it, because you would think to yourself, well, that is actually impressive. But you wouldn't want that to be immortal. Because if you were immortal, it will be like, why would an artist be so keen on finishing his painting if he was immortal? Why would a singer would be stressed to finish his CD, his music? You would have all the time in the world. You would never have to worry about it. So you would lose your purpose. You would lose your time. You would lose the essence of life, what makes it good. So if your loved one could never die, you would always have a tomorrow to spend with them. And because you have an infinite number of tomorrow, you can neglect it. You would leave words unsaid. You would stay buried in your phone while they speak to you. Because you would think, yeah, but tomorrow I can do that. I can actually do that in a week, in a year, in 100 years. But no, life is a gift, and the finality of life is a gift. It's a needle that pricks us into the presence. It adds a necessary urgency to our kindness. And Marcus Aurelius said something about that. He said, wander aimlessly no longer. Do not reserve your memoirs or your best thought for an old age that might never arrive. You may not have lost your loved one, yet, but what you truly fear is the end of the new experiences. So you should go and have them now. Because if you don't use the sting of mortality to fuel your devotion, like those artists that I've mentioned, you're just wasteful with the time you have. And if you are not, then when death arrives, you can meet it with a smile, a clear conscience, knowing that you didn't shy away from reality in a fog of false hope. So to pass through this brief life as nature demands, to give up without complaint, like an olive that ripens and falls, praising its mother, thanking the tree it grew on. So when the end comes for your loved ones or for you, whatever happened is now set in stone. There's nothing you can do about it. You cannot control the sequence of events. You cannot control death. You cannot control anything, but you can remain the absolute master of your opinion, of your thoughts. And that is your fortress. And that is why they talk about fortress so much. Because if you're able to handle that, you're able to handle anything that comes at you. If you're able to handle that fortress and to build it for yourself, there you're going to be a happier man, a happier woman. So no man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity. Do not be deceived. Do not think a thing is good just because it is pleasant. Focus on what only is in your power, your pursuit, your desire, your character, your purpose. Fate is like a leash. And you're the dog. You can follow the path with noble virtue, or you can be dragged along in sin, in sorrow, but the path remains the same. The only thing that changes is the dignity which you were working with. Finally, it is hard, but think to yourself, what should you do now? What you should take away from that video, from that audio? Well, you should accept the universe, accept the seasons. From the universe, all things come, and to the universe, all things return. Accept the reality that is now, and try to make the best of today. Peace.